Hello, and welcome to this virtual phone bank training webinar for the DeKalb Dems. I'm Janet Grant, and I'm going to lead you through the next half an hour or so of information to prepare you to phone bank for the DeKalb Dems and our Get Out the Vote efforts for this coming election. Over the course of this webinar, we're going to cover a number of things, but really it boils down to two major areas. I want to give you some information about vote by mail. This is an initiative that we are really trying to support with voters all across DeKalb, especially given the current pandemic situation. And then we are going to really walk through some of the technical aspects of how to use the phone bank system to get you started and how to use the tools within that to lead through each conversation with a voter. And then we'll talk about next steps and how to get started with actually phone banking. So again, welcome to our, as we call it, our Voting DeKalb initiative. This initiative is done in collaboration with the Democratic Party of Georgia. We're working very closely together to turn this state blue in 2020. And specifically, our initiative around phone banking is calling our voters here in DeKalb to inform them about the options for the upcoming election. We're talking today about the runoff election here on August the 11th, but we very much have our eyes focused on November the 3rd as well, and this initiative will support getting out voters for both. We are encouraging the use of that safe vote by mail option, given the pandemic that we are dealing with, and we'll talk more a little bit about that in a minute. And then ultimately, obviously, our goal here is to get out the vote. DeKalb has a significant number of Democratic voters and can really make a difference in terms of our Georgia elections this year. So we are very focused on getting folks out to vote, and in many cases that means staying home to vote. So first, before we get into the content, want you to think a little bit about why you're calling, why you're volunteered for this initiative. If we were live, which I hope that we are maybe next year, if we were live right now, we would have this as a conversation and have folks share some of the reasons that you're interested in calling DeKalb voters. Some of the reasons that, that we find that volunteers have are, and some of the reasons that we're putting forth this initiative is certainly, first of all, to diversify the state's electorate. We have made great progress in the state of Georgia in electing Democratic candidates, and we want to have a more diversified number of candidates put forward and elected into significant offices here in the state of Georgia. We want a phone bank in order to inform voters about their options. What we have found in our phone banking earlier this year and preparing for the June 9th primary is there's a lot of confusion out there because of vote by mail options and other changes that have happened in relation to the pandemic, changes in polling locations, etc. We have a lot of confused voters, and so a big part of this initiative is to make sure that they know their options and that they can exercise their right to vote. And lastly, we really want to make a connection between voters and the party, for them to see that the Democratic Party can be a resource to them. And we're going to talk about many resources later in this session that the Georgia Democratic Party have made available and that we are leveraging here with the DeKalb Dems, so that voters really do have all the information they need to exercise their right, and that they'll see the Democratic Party as a resource for them. So those are some of the reasons why I'm sure that you're volunteering and why we are so committed to this initiative to phone bank for the upcoming election. So let's talk a little bit about vote by mail. As I said earlier, we had a lot of voters that were very confused earlier this spring when vote by mail applications went out to registered, well, I should say to active voters. They actually did not go out to inactive voters. The Secretary of State chose those to send those only to active voters. But here in DeKalb County made the decision to send them to all registered voters. But that's not going to happen again for this election. And we'll talk in a second about what we think is upcoming. But for the August 11th runoff election, there will not be any applications mailed out to voters. So they need to proactively ask for vote by mail. And in fact, I also want to make sure that you're aware that in-person early voting runs here in DeKalb from July 20th until August the 7th. So we have just started that period, and there are 5 locations, and we'll give you the link later in this session. There are 5 locations across DeKalb County where folks can go for early voting. So if they are either too late to apply for vote by mail or feel more comfortable doing in-person voting, certainly we want to encourage voters to go early and avoid lines, avoid the issues with crowds that could result in concerns about the virus and so forth on election day or on the last few days of early voting that also had significant lines in the June 9th primary. So in terms of vote by mail, a person needs to proactively get that application. We'll be providing you links. They can get those a number of places, but the Georgia Democratic voting site has really all the resources, so we would encourage referring voters to that site so they can get all the information they need in one place. You can also request an application or download an application from the Secretary of State site or from the DeKalb Board of Elections website as well. If a voter is over the age of 65, disabled, or lives overseas, on that application, they can request to automatically receive a ballot for every election during this election cycle, which will take us through early January. So if they have already checked that box and they already did vote by mail for the June election, they will automatically and should have already received their ballot for the August 11th election, and they'll also be receiving them for November election, December election, and January election. If they have not requested one before, would encourage them to check that box on their application so that they don't have to send in an application for each election. Those folks that are not 65, disabled, or live overseas do have to request an application vote to receive an absentee ballot for each election separately. Those vote by mail applications can be then delivered to the Board of Elections here in DeKalb County, either in person at their office on Memorial Drive. They can be mailed to that office, or you can take a picture or scan the completed applications and email those to the Board of Elections, which that's probably the quickest way at this point in time. And then once the ballot is received and completed by the voter, then it is returned by mail to, can be returned to the Board of Elections a variety of ways, either by mail, in person again, or by drop boxes. And we have a number of drop boxes located all around the county now. And so that's an easy and safe way to return a ballot. And we'll again give you the link for the locations of those drop boxes. And those also are identified on the Democratic Party website. Those have to be received by the Board of Elections by 7 p.m. on August 11th. So at the time that the polls close, that is when those vote by mail ballots must be returned. So now we're going to pivot to talking about the vote by mail system, or I mean the phone banking system. Have vote by mail on my brain. So the phone banking system that we're using is called VAN. And for those of you that have done canvassing in the past or done phone banking in the past, most likely if you've done phone banking in the past, it would have been in this VAN system. Or if you've done canvassing in the past, you probably used the minivan application on your cell phone for that canvassing activity. Those are sister programs, and your action ID that you already would have is good for accessing the VAN system. So if you already have an action ID, you simply put in your email address and your password. When you sign up to Phonebank, the evening before, usually the evening before or the morning of the Phonebank, I will be sending to you a Phonebank code that looks like this on this slide. And that code, that link, will take you to this sign-in screen. And at this point, you would put in your email and password, and then it will take you right into the Phonebank system. If you do not remember your password, just simply click on the forgot your password, and it will trigger you being able to select a new password. If you have not Phonebank before or done canvassing before and you don't have an action ID, then simply click on the create an account on that first login screen, and then it will take you to this screen. And this is the way to create an account. It's a very simple, quick process. You simply put in your email address, the password that you want to use, your name and phone number, and it will create an account for you. There is a two-factor authentication process because of the security, certainly, that's involved in the system, given all the voter records that are contained. So again, that code that you will click on will take you to that screen to log in, and then you will be logged into the system. And when you log into the system, it automatically brings up the first voter. And as you can see on this page here, I have blanked out the name of the voter that I got this screenshot from. Actually, I guess I am still showing that his first name is David. So a David that lives in the Reed Coffer Library precinct. But anyway, his name and phone number will show up, his age and sex, as you can see, his voting location. So you'll know before you're making that phone call a little bit about the voter that you are calling. So the first thing you're going to do is then, once you're comfortable with knowing who you're going to be talking to, is you dial their phone number. And if you are not able to reach that voter, if you are able to leave a voicemail, we do have in the script, the very first part of the script that you can see here on the screen is a suggested voicemail. So we do want to take every advantage to be able to connect with that voter. And if you aren't able to get them in person on the phone, to be able to leave a voicemail is the next best thing. And the critical piece that we want to communicate in that voicemail is really giving them the resource of the voter protection hotline. And we're going to talk more about the hotline a little bit later, but that's the phone number that you really want to leave. You don't leave your own phone number. You really want to leave the voter protection hotline as being the resource for them if they have any questions about their the upcoming election. So if you again are not able to reach them after you leave your voicemail, if you're able to leave a voicemail, then simply click on the I couldn't reach, and it has the first name of the voter. So in this case, it's I couldn't reach David, and a drop-down box will come with a number of reasons about why you couldn't reach him. Not at home, refused, deceased, moved, call back, etc. So if you were able to leave a message, then click left a message. If it's a wrong number or disconnected, those are really critical things for us to gather so that we can continue to clean up this database and have accurate information about the voters. And then, as I said, the other reasons here you would choose accordingly. Now, if you are able to get a voter on the phone, and by the way, I want to make sure that you do know that it is a challenge to get voters to answer these phone calls. We have been running about 15% success rate, so there will be a number of folks that you are leaving voicemails for, but those 15% that you reach, we want to take full advantage of that conversation with those voters. So in the VAN system, a phone script, after we get through the section of whether you're able to reach them or not, then the phone script comes up for you. And again, your first time calling, you may want to kind of review the phone script so that you feel comfortable with what you're all going to be asking. There's really just 3 questions that there are drop-down boxes for you to choose a yes or a no. The rest is really just a guide for you in having the conversation. So again, you want to greet the person, tell them your name, tell them that you're calling with DeKalb Democrats, try to establish, some rapport right away in the beginning of the call. Then, state the purpose of the call, which is really around giving information about vote by mail options and the fact that those applications aren't going to be mailed out, and asking if they are interested in applying for vote by mail. If they are, then there's, again, a script in terms of being able to share information about vote by mail with them, how to access an application and how to return it, etc. If they are not, then the next part of the script is, and I guess I don't have it here on the screen. The next part of the script is really giving them more information about the early election process as well as election day information. Then after you've had that conversation really about voting, then the next pieces are a little bit more generic kinds of questions. So the first one is that obviously we are trying to support Democratic candidates and voting in the upcoming election. So a generic question that we ask is, can we count on your support for Democrats in the upcoming election? And you can choose yes or no there. If they say yes, then we want to go on and see if they are willing to help us with this effort, if they're willing to volunteer for phone banking or other things that can help with the upcoming get out the vote efforts. And so you can go on and ask that again, ask yes or no. And we did add a question this time around also being a poll worker or a poll monitor. Given the need and shortage for poll workers, we're trying to gather names of folks that might be interested in order to get them more information about that, as well as we are always looking for poll monitors to monitor the election. So those are the questions that you're going to be asking. And then really that's the conclusion of the call. So at the end, there are within the script some information with the resources that we're going to talk about a little bit later so that you have handy access to those during the phone call. And then at the very bottom here, I wanted to show you this. There is a note section. And in that note section, you can put in either special requests or concerns. You can make note of those in there. And then also, especially if someone is interested in volunteering If you can gather any other contact information, either updated other phone numbers or email addresses, that would be very helpful to put into the note section. Then again, we always want to give people the voter protection hotline number. So you can give that to the caller if they have any other additional questions or need additional help. That's the resource that we want to communicate. And then at the end of that script, then you would say, would click save and go on to your next call. And then when you are done with your phone banking shift, then you click the button, stop making calls, and it will help you log out. So just one thing to stress, and that is around documentation. It's really important to document all of your interactions through the script. As you see, there's not a lot to document. It's basically the answers to those couple of yes and no questions. And then if there's any additional things that you want to put into the note section. But really completing that information helps us know what the status is of the of that particular voter, and assures that we're not contacting them again in this cycle. So very important to document your findings. So a few scenarios that we've, some of these that we've already talked about, and a few more just to give you some examples. First of all, as I said, if you do get a voicemail, please go ahead and take the opportunity to leave that voicemail. And we do have that suggested voicemail script right at the top of the script in the phone banking system, so that you have ready access to that. And make sure to emphasize the voter protection hotline phone number as the resource for folks to call back to. If it's disconnected or a wrong number, again, please make sure to document that so that we know for the purposes of cleaning up the database. Another purpose of phone banking is to really get accurate information and update information on voters. If a parent or another family member answers the phone, and they may tell you that the person is either not there and that they're not home, and so then I would just indicate not home on the drop-down box. But if they indicate that the person has moved, for instance, I had a situation the other day where a parent answered and said their child was now in college and permanently living in Massachusetts and had registered to vote there. So in that case, I would, click on the moved option for why we weren't able to reach them. If you happen upon someone that's really hesitant to have a conversation, again, just, we want this to be a supportive conversation. This is not about, being aggressive with anybody. So just handle that tactfully and end the call if they really do not want to have a conversation. And then sometimes you'll have folks that answer and say, can you call back? And again, you're not going to call back. There isn't a way for you to even get back to that caller in the system in the future, but indicate that they're asking for a call back in that drop-down box so that they go back into the queue for another phone banker to contact them in the future. Here is the voter protection hotline number, really important number for all of us to know and to give out. This is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with volunteers that are very skillfully trained, as well as DPG staff. And they can certainly answer questions and or get back to voters with any kind of question about the election process or a particular situation that a voter is encountering. So please make sure to use that as a resource for our voters. Sometimes you will get a voter who is very interested in having a longer conversation, especially with the fact that folks are being isolated right now. So again, apologize that you don't have more time to talk, and just try to stay to the script in order to facilitate getting through the conversation. So those are the technical details related to the phone banking process itself. I want to do a plug at this point about how we communicate with each other as our phone banking team and as part of the organizing team overall for DeKalb Dems, and that is through a tool called Slack. And Slack is a very user-friendly system that's essentially an opportunity for us to have chat and post information for each other. So I would strongly encourage you as a part of our phone banking community to join Slack. You can do it either on your desktop or you can download an app to your iPhone or your iPad. And I have here the invitation link for you to be able to join Slack. I'll also have that in the emails that you receive related to this training and in follow-up to this training. So please join us on Slack. That is the place that we are posting like the latest information. These slides from this training will be posted there, and we'll be posting the latest information about any changes in the voting process, additional Dropbox locations, et cetera, et cetera. So please join us on Slack so that you can keep up to date as you are going forward with phone banking and getting involved in the DeKalb Dems. So we are really at the end of this webinar, and you are now fully trained and briefed to be able to get going with phone banking. So please just review the materials. Again, this slide deck will be posted on Slack under the phone banking channel. And so you can review that, review the materials, the links that that I've been sending in the in your confirmation for this training. And as you sign up for phone banking, those links will always be available in the phone bank confirmation detail emails that you'll receive as well. And then it's time to sign up for volunteer shifts. So we do have shifts scheduled now up until election day, this next election day, and then we will obviously be doing this again up until November. So sign up for those shifts. We have those as 2-hour shifts 3 times a day, and would love to have you volunteer as much as you can. DeKalb County is a large county, and we are trying to cover and get to as many voters as we can in the short time ahead up until election day. So then you'll be prepared to start calling. Here are some of the resources. Again, these are listed in the emails that you'll be receiving and also on the Slack site. Overall, I would encourage you to get familiar with the Georgia Democratic website. They have a lot of voting resources available, including the application, instructions for completing the vote by mail application, where you send the application back to the physical address, Dropbox locations, etc., are all available on the Georgia Democratic website. Our DeKalb Board of Elections site has the specific Dropbox locations listed for DeKalb, as well as the 5 sites for early election that are up and going now. Those hours are also posted. Another resource that I guess I haven't mentioned up until now, but is really an important resource is for every voter in Georgia, and that's My Voter Page. It's on the Secretary of State website, and by just putting in your name and birth date, you have all the information that the Secretary of State has in terms of your registration, where your polling location is. There's a link to be able to check the status of your vote by mail application as well as your ballot. So that is a site that every voter should really know about. Again, the Voter Protection Hotline, and again, Slack, that we want all of you to be a part of so that you can be part of our community and be involved as we move forward with our Get Out the Vote campaign. So with that, I want to thank you for participating in this training. and for participating in phone banking. It's a very important initiative. Given that we can't go out and canvass, which canvassing is the most effective technique for getting out the vote, but given that we can't do that this election cycle, by far the most effective tool that we have available to us is phone banking. So appreciate your efforts and being part of this important initiative. If you have questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you, and have a great day. Sign up to Phonebank.